The word says he weeps bitterly. But then you fast forward a couple of chapters and he's on the seashore. And Jesus comes to that same Peter and says, Peter, do you love me? I wish I had somebody. I said, I believe that if Judas decided not to hang himself, that Jesus would have restored him back into the fold. I said, because Judas wasn't the only disciple to do something wrong. Peter denied him. The other disciples got MIA. I said they left him hanging. And yet Jesus looks at them, to a man and woman, and says, you know what you've seen me do. Greater works than these shall you do. I believe that Jesus would have betrayed Judas. Can you imagine what power Judas would have preached with had he allowed Jesus' forgiving power to work in his life? I'm the one who betrayed him. I'm the one that sent him to the cross. But he forgave me anyway. The reason why I can't stand some church folks is because we act like we've been saved all our lives. Amen. Like we ain't never done anything wrong. I said your word ought to be authentic and it ought to be powerful because at one time I was a mess. I said I'm a little bit less of a mess, but I'm still a mess. I was a hot mess then. But Jesus reached way down and he picked me up. I wish I had somebody right through here that can testify. It's nothing but the Lord's grace and his mercy. I said, can you imagine if Peter preached and 3,000 souls were added? Can you imagine if Judas had allowed Jesus to do his forework on the inside of him? Can you imagine the word that comes from Judas? Can we get to a place that we allow God to heal us from our hurts? Can we allow the forgiving work of God to soften our hearts? Can we get to a place that we forgive ourselves because we knew it was wrong? But we did it anyway. I said, can we get to a place? Or will we metaphorically hang ourselves and stop our lives because we made some bad decisions? I believe that had Judas lived, Jesus would have forgiven Judas. Said you beat yourself up long enough. Considered yourself unworthy of God's grace for long enough. Castigated yourself long enough. Allow God's forgiveness to flow through you. Even when people around you don't want to let you live down what you did. Amen. Touch somebody and say it's time to let it go. Yeah. Jesus stands before Pilate, who wanted to meet Jesus because of all he's heard about him. Pilate's questioning him and even presented him before the people in a last gasp effort to free him. Besides the well-known crook, Barabbas. Barabbas had a reputation of being short-tempered, easily angered, a con artist, a thief, etc. But the crowd still wanted Pilate to release Barabbas and crucify Jesus. Do you know why that excited me the first time I read it and why it still excites me May 26, 2019? Because I still don't have everything together. Y'all looking at me real funny. I still have my days when I will cut you a look. And I may say something if you cut me off on the highway. I still have days that I'm impatient. Still have moments that I'll burn bridges down when provoked with my tongue. But yet, Jesus traded places with me. I thought I had some real folks at the invitation that don't mind admitting that I have some struggles sometimes. I don't have it all together. I don't cross every T. If you catch me on the wrong day, you might not get blessed and highly favored. But because he traded places with me, I'm still here. Amen. Today, I'm coming for the real folks. I said, still have days that I do more complaining than praying. Still have days that I don't want to be bothered. Still have moments that somebody will get told, but yet he traded places with me. Aren't you glad that Jesus traded places with you? Yeah. with your sloppy, messy, crooked self. With my instigating, crooked, messy self, I'm thankful to God that Jesus, even though the crowd wanted Barabbas for other reasons, I'm glad that Jesus traded places with me. Somebody ought to say, I know that's right. He traded places with me too. After the verdict comes down, Pilate washes his hands of the deeds of religious leaders. Symbolically washes his hands of the deeds of the religious leaders, symbolically excusing himself from all the rest of the proceedings. The soldiers then take Jesus, strip him, as Gardner C. Taylor would say, of his own clothes, put a robe on him, put a stick in his hand, stick a crown of thorns in his head, and they false worship him. Side note, don't have time to preach on this, but how many times have we mock worship Jesus? Another sermon for another time. They led him to be crucified, forced a man named Simon to carry Jesus to the cross. They then nailed Jesus to the cross, and there he hangs in agony. I said, what do you do though? Jesus is now suspended in the air on the cross, betrayed, denied, and abandoned by his disciples. But then he feels abandoned by God. Come on, walk with me. Because while he's on the cross, Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's one thing for people who I know going to be fair weather to leave me hanging. It's one thing for people that can be a little bit sketchy to leave me hanging. It's one thing for people that I know may not have it together all the time to leave me hanging. But it's a totally another thing. It's another thing now when I feel that God has abandoned me. Say, I may shed one or two tears because somebody decided to walk out of my life, but I'm going to be all right. But when I feel God is nowhere to be found, what do you do when you feel left hanging and in the midst of a painful situation? Jesus releases his spirit, and the curtain of the sanctuary was torn from top to bottom. And the centurion who watched Jesus from the time he was face to face with Pilate to the time he died says, truly, I'm on down 27 now. Y'all got to keep walking with me. This was a or the Son of God. Now I'm going to show you why that's significant. Because if this a centurion says this is a Son of God, they only gave that designation to one person in the Roman government, and that was the emperor. So the centurion would be saying, if he said a Son of God, that this man named Jesus who just died on the cross is on the same level with the man who writes my checks. But if he said that he is the Son of God, he becomes the first Gentile to confess Jesus as Lord in the Gospel of Matthew. I said it really doesn't matter where you get in, but the fact that this man who has been stripped of his clothes, gambled for his clothes, is now either on the same level of the emperor or higher, speak volumes about the impact Jesus had on his life. Said all that to say there's a lot going on in this chapter. Before we get to our feature text. For after Jesus dies, there's a man by the name of Joseph of Arimathea. In our text, he's called a new follower of Jesus, who asked for Jesus' body because he had certain connections. Pilate releases Jesus' body to Joseph. Don't miss the significance here. None of the people who should have been there to ask for Jesus' body are anywhere to be found, except for a few women who were standing by and watching everything. But none of the disciples are anywhere to be found. Everybody who should have claimed Jesus is now MIA. I gotta keep moving though. I said according to a few sources, this becomes a dangerous request. First of all, because only family members were allowed to make this type of request. Because Joseph is not an immediate family member, he could have been brought up on charges of treason and sentenced to death himself. But then secondly, we learn that Joseph is a member of the same group that the Jewish council that put Jesus to death. So by asking for Jesus' body, Joseph is making an announcement to all of his colleagues that I may be around with y'all, but I'm playing on a different team now. I said, have you ever been in a place that you were hanging out with friends and family, and you found yourself making an announcement that I love y'all, but I got to do something different in my life? I don't know if anybody else, that resonates for anybody else. Have you ever been around friends that you know were up to no good, but they kept you laughing? I said, and you found yourself convicted because the Lord was calling you to something different, something greater. Not that you were better than anybody, but the Lord was calling you higher. I said, I love y'all. I said, but I can't kick it with y'all like that anymore, because the Lord is doing something new on the inside of me. Joseph makes an announcement when he asks for Jesus' body, that this is the man that I will follow even to death. Y'all still awake out there? Yeah. I said, people will stop trying to slide. If I had some more young folks, I know I got Justin in the house, but if Justin had some of his friends, I said, when you start following Jesus, certain people stop trying to slide in your DMs. I said, my Facebook folks in the building, I said, they stop trying to get in the inbox because they know you're not about foolishness. I said, for my non-social media delegation, Joseph is about to lose some friends, associates, colleagues, and contacts. Some people are getting ready to delete his number because he's pledged his allegiance with Jesus. But then the text says, and this is why I've been trying to get this whole time, that he lays Jesus in his tomb. Somebody's gonna miss it. I said, authorities, scholars argue over what type of linen was used in that day. And we know that burying someone was normally a process, but due to the Passover coming the next day, Joseph and his team had to quickly bury the body of Jesus. They didn't necessarily put all the oils that they would normally have, but they did make sure to include some spices within the wrap and some on the body to keep the stench down. And on the other side of Passover, they would come back. This is why the text says early in 28 that the women have come back with the oils and spices, because they want to finish what they started before Passover. I said, culturally speaking, they didn't even have time for a funeral, but they did what they could, and they laid Jesus in Joseph's tomb. Somebody's gonna miss it. I said, again, only kings were placed in new tombs, but here it is that Jesus is being placed in Joseph's new tomb. I said, I just told you that family members would claim the body of a loved one, but he's being laid in Joseph's tomb. The tomb was set up to receive family members, but yet Jesus is laid in Joseph's tomb. Jesus had a lot going on in his life. Had family, had parents, had siblings, had disciples, had a place to stay, had a place to lay his head at Mary and Martha's, but he did not have a tomb. I said, hey, he couldn't stay there. Somebody's going to miss it. I said, there are certain things. I told you that Jesus could not stay there. Let me make my case now, because I know we have some different understandings about the way the world works today versus when I was a child. But when I was growing up, one of the things my mother used to always tell me, Sister Faye and Sister Jackie, is that if somebody lets you borrow something, you got to give it back. Somebody that missed their shout. I said, here it is. Jesus does not have his own tomb, but rather he's been laid in Joseph's tomb. I said, and since this is not Jesus' tomb, but it's Joseph's tomb, it says to me, where I'm from, that Jesus has to give the tomb back. Somebody's missing it. Somebody's still not feeling me in here. I said, this is not Jesus' tomb that Jesus has been laid in, but rather it's Joseph's tomb. And since it's Joseph's tomb, I said Jesus has to give it back. And the only way Jesus is going to be able to give this tomb back is when he's resurrected from the dead. I need you to high five somebody real quick and say, I refuse to stay there. That was the wrong neighbor. Find somebody else around you and say, this is just borrowed. Just borrowing the car. Just borrowing the house. Just borrowing the friend. But I'm not staying here. He could not stay there because this is not his tomb. I said that there's some things in your life that you've had to go through. Some tight spots, some dark places that you've been in. But I'm so glad for John chapter 20. Because when I read over in John chapter 20, it says that when they go and inspect in the tomb, there's a cloth that's thrown to the side. And then there's a cloth that's neatly folded. And I was here during Lenten season, but I think I need to come back through John chapter 20. Because any Jewish servant understands what's going on around the dinner table. When somebody in the house is finished with their meal, they simply throw the towel on the plate. And it's a symbol that they're done. I said, but when they take the time to fold their cloths and neatly put it on the table, it means that I'm coming back. Let me come get somebody an invitation. This is your season to fold your towel. I'm not throwing in a towel. I'm not balling up a towel. I'm not throwing the towel on anything. But I'm going to fold that bad boy up. I wish I had some Kleenex in there, some Kleenex right now. Can y'all pass the Kleenex around to everybody? Everybody get a Kleenex. There's a box right there. Everybody get a sheet of Kleenex. I said pass the box around. And there's going to be some tight spots that you find yourself in. And this Kleenex is going to preach to you. I said because you find yourself in a dark place of life. I said but anytime you fold it, it means that you're going to bounce back. Do I have any bounce back saints in here? Any folks that's been down? Any folks that felt like they've been out? I said, but the Lord gave them what they needed to bounce back. Bounce back from the foolishness. Bounce back from the heartache. Bounce back from the heartbreak. Bounce back from the broken friendship. Bounce back from the financial burdens. Bounce back from the hard-headed children. Bounce back from the ugly acting family members. Bounce back, bounce back, bounce. Fold your Kleenex and put it somewhere where you know you're going to see it every once in a while. And when you find yourself in a tight spot, the Kleenex will begin to preach to you. I said, this ain't for blowing your nose. This is not for wiping the tears. But this is to signify that the greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. And the same God that raised Jesus from the dead is the same God that allowed me to bounce back.